part 5 of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar series. This 8-part webinar series has featured 2 tracks. Sessions on the Tuesday track are aimed at building diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in your workplace and in the community. And sessions on the Thursday track are focused on highlighting diverse-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. This webinar series is presented by the Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and sponsored by PNC Bank. Before I introduce our presenting sponsor, I wanted to go over some housekeeping items. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. To be respectful of everyone's time, we have allotted time at the end for questions and answers. Feel free to ask a question at any time during the presentation by submitting them in the Q&A section or in the chat box. This event is also being live streamed on Facebook. For anyone watching on Facebook, please enter your questions in the comment section and we will ask them for you on your behalf. A recording of this session will also be available on our Facebook and YouTube pages by the end of the week and will be linked on the main event page for the webinar series. Now, to get us started, I want to thank our sponsor, PNC Bank, for again sponsoring our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar series. We have a quick video from PNC to show, and then we'll hear some remarks from Jamie Ryan before he introduces today's speaker.
On behalf of PNC Bank, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. At PNC, we embrace and promote diversity, equity, inclusion as core elements of our values and culture. We recognize that it is bigger than any single person or group when coupled with collaborative teams and inclusive leaders has far-reaching impact. Taking the time to join us today indicates that you're interested in learning more about the roles and responsibilities necessary to create more opportunities for positive understanding and change. Thank you for showing up to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion today. Thank you also to Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber for creating this series and to the phenomenal presenters for sharing their time and expertise to help foster a more inclusive culture in our community. Now I'd like to quickly introduce Natalia Lyckowski. Natalia is proudly neurodivergent and parent of an autistic IT professional. Nat empowers acceptance culture by designing safe spaces to self-identify and developing education and initiatives that improve trust and allyship. So without further ado, Nat, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the opportunity to visit with you all today, and thank you for your time for joining. So warmly welcomed, my name is Nat Lyckowski, and I am a neurodivergent. I'm also a self-advocate and an ally, and I am the parent of a neurodivergent who is an IT professional, and I myself an IT professional. So I'm going to be sharing with you today some information about IBM's neurodiversity program and hopefully about neurodiversity in general, and hopefully this can bring everybody into a conversation, and that's what we want. So for over 100 years, IBM has embraced diversity, diversity of race, of ethnicity, of gender, of ability, and of sexual orientation and identity, and genetics, and many factors. But how else can we improve diversity? And the next chapter in your diversity story could be diversity of the mind. So what is neurodiversity? This may be a new topic or a new word for some of you. And neurodiversity is a concept to accept and respect people with neurological differences. And these differences can include autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, and many other neurological differences. These differences need to be viewed as a variation of the human condition, and not a disease to be cured. And we really could use all of your help to increase awareness, but move past that and move towards acceptance. What does neurodivergent mean, this strange word? It's really just a person with a neurological difference. And that difference can be innate, meaning born with, or acquired over time, like a traumatic brain injury. And traditionally, under the neurodiversity or neurodivergent realm, you do have these common ones, autism, ADHD, but it also may include bipolar, PTSD, anxiety, and other mental differences. And just to keep in mind, a community can be neurodiverse, but a person is either neurotypical or neurodivergent. So we're going to start with a quick thought experiment. And I'd like everybody, wherever you are, to close your eyes for a moment and think of a bird, how it moves, what it looks like, what it eats. Got it? So I'm going to invite a few people to come off mute and just tell me the name of their bird that they've thought of.
Hi, Natalia. I thought of a robin.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Anybody else? Come on, don't leave. Hi.
A cardinal.
A cardinal. Wonderful. Any others?
Good morning, an owl.
An owl. Wonderful. So I now want you to take a look at this bird. This is our friendly penguin. And the neurodivergents are the penguins here. We use our wings for swimming and not flight. On land, we might be a little awkward, but put in the right environment, we are strong swimmers. We can extend and tolerate extreme cold temperatures. We can watch and tend our young, our egg, without a nest. We do not need to be fixed. We're birds. And we need to be accepted as a bird. We don't need genetic research to find out why we don't fly. This is the way we are. But if you took this penguin and you put us in the middle of a desert, we would not do well. So we really have to work on finding the right skills for the right environment and matching everything up. We're going to try one more experiment. Does an iCal work on an Android phone? It's a simple yes or no. Somebody from the audience? Does iCal work on an Android? Okay, y'all being shy. Go ahead.
I don't think so.
No, you're right. It doesn't. And this is the same with the neurodivergence in the room. We are not broken. We're only running on a different operating system. So whether you're Apple, Mac, Apple, Linux, Windows, there's not an issue. We're just running on a different operating system. So why think about hiring neurodivergents? Under the strengths, you can get original thinking, creative problem solving, an intense focus, very good pattern recognition, attention to detail, people who are passionate, honest, and fair. Under the benefit side, this can lead to innovation for your company, which leads to increased revenue. And in corporate, improve your corporate citizenship. You get better empathetic managers, increase your employee morale. And most of these accommodations that you might need, which I really see as a way for that person to succeed, are inexpensive. You don't need to redesign your physical space. Under the challenges, there may be issues with communication, sensory sensitivities, social interaction, emotional regulation, recruiting, the interview process. And that's usually where most neurodivergents are blocked from employment. They might be viewed as weird or strange or not exhibit the appropriate eye contact or not enjoy small talk. And we have a lot of biases here that we need your help to work on. So just some statistics. IBM has been in this space for about 5 years, but there are companies that have been doing this in over 10. So we are able to look at some of those metrics. In general, 1 in 50 individuals are autistic and 1 in 20 are neurodivergent when you look at all of the other neurodivergent differences. Right now, there is an 85 unemployment rate amongst college-educated autistic adults. But if you do choose to embrace neurodiversity, you can get a 66% higher job loyalty, 32% new skills and innovation, shorter training times, higher productivity, and all with no or little significant costs. Really, only what's needed is understanding and an open heart. Some of the neurodivergent challenges. Many experience discomfort or pain to external stimuli. We may be perceived as being rude. We might talk too long, interrupt, not look you in the eye, be misunderstood and viewed as too honest. On occasion, shut down if under or overstimulated and just need a moment to recover. And many use relaxation techniques such as pacing or rocking in their chair or jittering on their fingers. Many have additional differences at the same time, like dyslexia with ADHD, with anxiety. And all of these can lead to the inability to pass that standard job interview. And this is where education and acceptance is really paramount. So a little bit of IBM trivia. Neurodiversity is actually the heart of IBM. A gentleman named Herman Hollerith. He was neurodivergent. He was born with cognitive processing differences. And he was known for jumping out of his school's second-story window to get out of spelling class. And I agree with him. I cannot spell very well, and I would have done the same. He also, that same person, got his graduate degree in engineering at age 19 from Columbia and invented the punch card tabulator you see in the picture here, and eventually was one of the founding fathers that evolved into IBM. So that's IBM then, and now I'm going to show you a brief video about IBM now.
What does it mean to be autistic or to be neurodivergent?
To be told that you are too sensitive, too honest, too literal, to be misunderstood.
The complexities of being neurodivergent in today's world are multi-layered and confusing at best, leading to thousands being unemployed with devastating impacts.
At IBM, we decided to rewrite the rulebooks, break down traditional employment barriers, and to hire neurodivergents globally, like me.
And to support and accept the neurodivergents that are already here at IBM, like me.
To move beyond awareness into acceptance, and not only of autistics, but dyslexics, ADHDers, and beyond.
To respect neurological differences as any other human variation. To be equal.
To be equal.
To be equal.
To be equal. Today, with neurodivergent IBMers, like me, we can bring a new perspective.
To share our strengths and passions, and work with others who share our goals.
So we all better understand ourselves.
Together we know our own business better, inside out.
Develop advanced solutions on very complex platforms.
Across blockchain, on cloud, or within cognitive systems.
The truth is, our approach to neurodivergent talent has made IBM more agile, faster, better.
More human.
More human.
IBM puts SMART to work with neurodivergent professionals.
So all of the people you saw in that video were are neurodivergent. And I actually wrote the script, so it was pretty much produced by our neurodivergent community. So quick history on neurodiversity at IBM. Since 2015, it began as a grassroots effort and launched by a volunteer business resource group. In 2017, we had our first targeted hiring program looking for autistic talent in Lansing, Michigan. And in 2020, our program was formally approved. We work on neurodiversity enablement and hiring around the world. And what I think is really special is that we are managed by neurodivergent and neurotypical employees. Our motto is nothing about us without us, which really means you can't do anything to help the neurodivergent community unless you're talking to the neurodivergent community and not some medical experts. We also work on developing neurodivergent friendly practices that are vetted, again, by neurodivergence. And we've actually developed safe space communities, virtual communities for neurodivergent employees to come together for support, but really to rally together and come as a think tank. So here's just a quick idea of when I say global, I mean global. So we have India, Australia, the Philippines, Asia Pacific, North America, and beyond. I do have some links about more things you can learn about neurodiversity, but I really wanted to move into how you can have a neurodivergent friendly practices in your workspace. So the first key is really respect and accept neurological differences just as any other factor. Seek out neurodivergent stakeholders. I'm sure they're in your company if you look hard enough and if you build a space where people are comfortable to come out. Your goal really should be a 50% neurodivergent representation. And again, not that caregiver or ally or a medical expert. In the neurodiversity space, we use identity-first language as this is what's preferred by the neurodivergent community. And by identity-first language, I mean saying an autistic or a neurodivergent individual and not saying a person with or has or on. We wouldn't say a person with maleness. We wouldn't say a person that has lesbianism. We wouldn't say a person that is on the Asian spectrum or a person with blackness. This is not something I carry in my pocket. It's something of who I am. And really work to respect the voice of neurodivergence. As part of this, we're also moving from the social or moving into a social model instead of a medical. So some of the words that we use, like they'll say recognized as being autistic and not diagnosed, or calling this a difference instead of a disorder or a condition, or even changing the words to say somebody is a high support or low support, depending versus having a functioning label. Like if you call somebody high functioning, what does that mean? You know how to tie your shoes or write your name in cursive. It's discrete, you can't measure it, but you can measure the amount of external support somebody gives. And even using additional needs instead of special needs, because it's a little pedantic. It's making things infantile. It's also important to look at the symbols that are approved and preferred by the neurodivergent community. For example, the infinity symbol is used over the jigsaw puzzle piece. The jigsaw puzzle piece has a very long history and was developed by medical professionals and caregivers to say we're not whole people, or that there's a mystery here, or that this is something that needs to be solved. And if you ask the community, they consider themselves whole people. not missing a piece, not a mystery, not something to be solved. The only thing normally missing is acceptance of who we are. So how to be an ally? Help to combat systemic discrimination. And normally this is blocking therapy by gender, race, and ethnicity. Trying to get a diagnosis for a young girl with ADHD is harder than a boy or a person of color. And watch for your unconscious bias and microaggressions. For example, like saying, oh, he's on the spectrum and that's why he's doing this. Neurodiversity is more than autism, and neurodivergence can be matched with things other than IT. And neurodivergence may exhibit the same behaviors or different behaviors or have different needs. And there's an intersectionality here, as we try to represent in our video, where you can be trans or Black or a combination of who you are and be neurodivergent. And really, let's work on focusing skills and therapies on the individual need and not societal norms. Please stop forcing eye contact or trying to get people to self-regulate so they don't pace or they don't rock. It really doesn't matter. And help us manage any attention skills or anxiety or things that we need personally to succeed and not to fit in or mask, where we can just be ourselves. So I like to think of, starting where you are, or think about where you are on that neurodiversity journey. Awareness is a good place to start, but it's passive. You can be aware that there's a new family that moved into your neighborhood that might be different from you, but that's different than acceptance. So while traditionally you may hear April as Autism Awareness Month, think bigger, challenge yourself. Move up the mountain to acceptance, where you're actually having conversations with neurodivergence and not just an ally. Or if you're looking to help an agency that might be trying to find a cure for autism, think about finding an agency that is run by neurodivergence, that's working on support for the community. And the last phase really is advancement, is where you do have a neurodivergent that you're helping lift up, where you're helping them amplify their voice, helping them to become a team manager or a team leader or a manager, or helping them just to come out of the closet. There's so many similarities between the neurodivergent and the LGBTQ+ community in that respect, in which you can't see by looking at me that I'm neurodivergent. And this is not something that I should be ashamed of, or something that I should mask, or something that needs to be fixed, or a blood test or an amniocentesis to find out if my child might be neurodivergent. It's just who we are. So that pretty much ends what I have prepared, and I really would like to have a great conversation and to challenge the norms and to have everybody be able to be equal.
Awesome. Thank you, Nat, for your presentation. I want to give everybody a chance to kind of put some questions in the chat box. And I know we were kind of talking a little bit before on why we get a question. I'll give kind of one question. I know you said you do a lot of these talks around with different countries and around the world. And you talk about how you have to tailor it to kind of where that country is. What countries, in your opinion, are doing the best with neurodiversity and acceptance in the workplace and in society in general?
I would say it's hard, because it's hard knowing where the best is, depending on what your sense of perspective is. I have seen a lot of positive work done in Australia, in UK, in the US, and Northern European countries, but there is still a lot of work to do in other areas, or in other parts of the world, or even parts of the world that are here in the US, but from a different culture, where neurodiversity is not something to be proud of and be like, wow, my son finished school at 19 and is now doing this or this, but he can't tie his shoes, or he can't, you know, do math. And I struggle with both of those things. Yet I've been an IBM application developer for 26 years. And it's really going beyond that, what you can't do, and looking at that environment of what you can do, and not judging somebody just on that one piece of who they are.
And please feel free, anybody, if you have any questions at this point, put them in the chat box or on Facebook if you're watching. But to kind of keep on going on, I know you said in your slideshow, oh, we did get a question. I'll ask that one first. Do you ask people to self-identify as neurodivergent and track how much of your workforce does?
That's an interesting question, and it also depends on where in the world you are. Coming out as being neurodivergent, it would be similar to ask if somebody if they were lesbian or gay or Muslim. So you need that same sense of sensitivity on the questions you ask, and also the data that you track and what it's actually used for. You know, would we need to know from an employer perspective as a whole, what percentage is this or that? It's really moved to an individual one-on-one piece to say, what do I need to succeed? We can encourage people to come out, but you really have to build that culture first, because nobody is going to come out. It's kind of like showing your pronouns after your name. It shows the world that you are an ally for the LGBT community. So using words like neurodivergent, having it included in a DEI summit like today, shows that maybe there might be some on the call that, depending on how many's there, I don't know how many viewers we have, but looking at that percentage, I can't be the only neurodivergent on this call. And it's having that freedom and safe space to be the culture to be able to come out.
Great points, thank you. During your presentation, you had a part on why it was important to have representation from the actual community, not allies or parents and different venues like that. Could you kind of expand more upon why that's so important?
Sure. I'm going to answer the question with another question, which usually bothers me, but I'm going to do it anyway, which is, if we take the word neurodivergent and we swap it out with any other DEI factor, why do you need representation? If you're doing a program to help people of color, who would you ask for insight? Would you ask, you know, people who were white? If you were doing community or an event for the LGBT community, you're not going to have the key speaker be straight. You have to get that sense of community and that sense of representation. And this really goes to, I've been told I use too many fancy words, but there's this word called pedantic, which basically means treating the person like a child. And sometimes, like if I say, oh, I have an autistic son, people are like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm not. He's working for one of the largest IT companies on the planet, not IBM. And hopefully will be picking me a very nice nursing home, because this gives him skills that, I mean, that he can be, you know, that he can be embraced. Or, you know, it's the same factor that if you encounter someone who is deaf and people start speaking louder because, you know, that's what they think they need, you have to ask people from the community. And we are here, and we are the best ones to tell you how to help your autistic child, as opposed to somebody that studied something in a medical book. I've had, you know, not arguments, but discussions where people have even said to me or my son, don't say that you're autistic, just say that you have this. And I'm like, oh, like having a broken bone, or having cancer, or having diabetes. And normally we put that have with something that needs to be fixed or a limitation, as opposed to saying, you know, we're using that identity first language.
And then this question actually kind of goes a little bit to, I believe we talked about this before the presentation. Do you advise neurodivergent job applicants to identify as such during the application process? And if so, at what stage? Is that something best saved for an interview, something in person, or discussed later in the process, perhaps once an offer is made?
In my opinion, in order for you to get the best position for you, I would disclose as early as possible. A lot of companies, when you're in that application process, there may be a pop-up box that say, click here if you have a disability. Now, using that term disability, there is a dichotomy within the neurodivergent community to say, is it a disability or not? But regardless of what the box says, if you do feel it is a disability or not, that's your opportunity to say, I'm neurodivergent. I need somebody who is experienced working with somebody who is neurodivergent. And let the conversation go from there, because that may mean as simple as when I have my job interview to understand that I'm not going to look you in the eye, or understand that if we're interviewing in a room that's near the elevator and that bing is going off every 5 minutes, or we're sitting near some kitchenette that has these weird smells of burnt popcorn and leftover Thai food coming in, I'm not going to be at my best. So I have it, like I said, I have it listed on my resume. And if you don't have that coming out beforehand, waiting for the interview may be too late. And there are some people that may say, no, stay in the closet. But I think coming out just exudes confidence to say, hey, this is me. I'm ready to work for you. I'm neurodivergent. These are the skills that I can bring. And if that company does not want to embrace you as a whole self, do you really want to work there anyway? It's a good question. Thank you.
I'm looking. If anybody has any more questions, I have one more to ask. And if not, then we'll wrap it up. But what are some things that companies could do with their employees or their stakeholders to kind of break some of the stereotypes around neurodiversity?
That's a great question. A lot of the stereotypes do come from our media. So if I say autistic, you might think Rain Man or Sheldon from Big Bang, or The Good Doctor, or some of these shows, which I think are great because they start that trail of awareness that hopefully people move on. But if you think of it, it shows you a white male who's really good in IT or a specific field, who's sometimes socially awkward, or maybe adorkable, as I like to use, but it doesn't go beyond there. And like we saw in our video, you could have, a trans Black accountant or somebody who's client facing. So it's removing that stereotype of what is your superpower. We all have superpowers regardless of our neurodivergent state, and it's really showing who we are. I would say for a company to just start having acceptance events. If you sponsor an autism walk, great, but what is that really doing for the community? Have discussions, let your employees know that it's safe to come out. I kind of use a gardening motif here, which is like, if you were going to build a new garden, you have to first break the ground. You can't just take new seeds and lie them on top and expect things to happen. You have to put in the work. You have to turn the soil over. You have to add your fertilizer and your nutrients and remove the rocks and the sticks so people could thrive. So it's doing that work ahead of time. So if you do bring in neurodivergent talent, they can take root. But at the same time, as you're changing your culture, you're also removing those rocks and sticks and weeds for neurodivergents who are probably already there and have never come out. And some of the simple accommodations that I thought I had a slide on, but maybe something happened to that. Some of the simple accommodations for neurodivergence might be coming into work 30 minutes later and staying 30 minutes later. So they're not physically, mentally exhausted from the commute, or having better noise canceling headphones, or not sitting near that noisy printer or the smelly kitchen. To be able to have open communication to say, I need things written out, or I need to record this meeting on WebEx so I can go back, or I want to do a status update with you on Wednesdays and Fridays and not having you ask me every single day, what have you done? Just having that clear, open communication where you can get these benefits, which does lead to revenue. This isn't just that warm fuzzy of something that we should do.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna give it just a moment if anybody has any last minute questions before we close out. Second. All right. Well, thank you, Nat, for speaking today with us, and we appreciate you spending your time with us. And thank you, everybody who joined us today, for spending your lunch with us. We did record this session and will be available on our Facebook and our YouTube pages for you to access, along with a playlist of the other sessions. We also encourage you to check out the event page to register for our next session. That is tomorrow at 4 p.m. It is the reschedule from last Tuesday, the Say What You Mean, Introduction to Nonviolent Communication, and it's presented by Khadija Means, and share the information with anybody that could benefit from this content. The Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber of Commerce's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council also looks at our chamber's diversity initiatives, ensures inclusion in chamber programs and policies, and works towards a more equitable future for all in the Wyoming Valley. If this is something that you're interested in getting involved with the council, check out our website and click on the Get Involved tab. There you can sign up to receive our news and communications from the DI Council, or join the council and assist in planning our programs and events. We hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day, and we hope to see you tomorrow at the next session. Thanks everybody for joining again, and thanks, Nat.
Bye-bye.